What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 21 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks on this Monday, July 3rd. Free agent frenzy is behind us. We've got a lot of new homes for a lot of new players in the NHL, including a couple that the Sens had their eyes on. Obviously, the Sens have a new goaltender in Jonas Korpisalo, but Brennan will get into everything about the Sens. What's going on with you today on this Monday?
Not much. I mean, I've just been sitting here this weekend patiently awaiting Sens news aside from Korpisalo, which was within the first 2 hours of free agency on Saturday. And yeah, we got absolutely nothing. So I think we've got a huge holdup going on right now and a bunch of, I mean, I'm sure Pierre's busy behind the scenes, right? Like this is what I've kept thinking is Pierre's got to be trying to work the phones behind the scenes. We've had rumors left and right all weekend, but nothing came to fruition. So I think still over the next few weeks here, we're going to get some excitement because for Ottawa, they still have a lot of holes to plug here. They're not the roster's not really near completion yet in my mind. I think they've still got a number of holes to fill.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. I mean, before we obviously went live, or after, sorry, I should say, we went live on Friday or on, yeah, it was Saturday, sorry. That Corpusalo became a senator. We went live, and then Dorion spoke to the media a couple hours later, and I watched that back that night, and he was pretty transparent about the process behind signing Corpusalo. He was good about talking about how they, you know, saw him, how they scouted him, they wanted him at the deadline, kind of thing. Stuff we already knew, kind of. But he talked a lot about his playoff this year. He said he was at Game 3 and 4, I think, in LA against Edmonton, and said he liked his Game 3 much better than Game 4. But yeah, it was good stuff about that. Also, good stuff about DeBrincat, which I think we should hit on first, and then we can get into some Corpusalo things. Obviously, the big holdup, and like you mentioned, the Sens have holes to fill on their roster, and it's mainly because they haven't made a decision, or maybe they have, but they haven't figured out a solution yet for Alex DeBrincat. But rumored I think it was late at night, kind of on July 1st, on Saturday, it kind of came out. Elliot Friedman said the DeBrincat situation is a factor, but Ottawa had a conversation with Vladimir Tarasenko, and it's worth mentioning because he, as of right now, as of recording, or this is Monday morning right now, and it'll come out later today, they haven't Tarasenko has not found a home yet, and I'm sure he's obviously got lots of offers, but he's still fielding stuff. So that's a good thing for Ottawa. It could mean to me, I mean, I don't know why other teams would be held up in signing him. I'd imagine he's waiting for Ottawa. Maybe that's the best offer he's got on the table, and because they need to wait with this DeBrincat thing, that's why he hasn't signed anywhere yet. I think there's some smoke there for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, with everybody else seemingly signing so far, the big names, anyways, Tarasenko is kind of the one outlier right now on the board still. And obviously, you can tie that to Ottawa. And with Friedman, too, like specifically saying it kind of matters what happens with DeBrincat here. It almost does seem like potentially Tarasenko likes the idea of joining the Sens. But again, because of DeBrincat, Ottawa can't add him right now. Like, we should talk about this DeBrincat thing because it's not really our preference of staying or going at this point. It's more of like, from what Pierre said, it seems like he's been trying really hard to trade him. Like that's transparently what it seems. But basically, and this kind of looks bad on DeBrincat and his agent, but the teams that he listed that he'd want to go to, including Detroit, have not been willing to offer him term. Like they haven't been willing to even match, from what Dorian said, match Ottawa's offer. Like Ottawa. I mean, that's how I took Dorian anyway. I don't know what about you, but it seemed like he said that teams would not offer as much as Ottawa would, which was 8 years, I'm assuming. And so DeBrincat basically, I mean, he's within his right. We should say he's within his right to want to test the market next year. He's going to get a big payday. Like as a player, a 25-year-old, that's fine. Nobody should be bitter with him for wanting to go to free agency. But at the same time, like somebody needs to take the blame for how much of a mess this whole situation is right now because Ottawa's missed out on a lot of good players. And I don't think like obviously the Bertuzzi thing is a big thing. Max Domi was kind of linked to them in a way that he would fit on the ice anyway. Maybe not so much off the ice, but like Toronto signed both of those guys, right? And they were kind of the two of the guys that we wanted Ottawa to go after. So it's been a little frustrating watching Ottawa stay still here and still have holes. I know DeBrincat on a 1-year deal is appealing to some. I'm going to pull up a little cap thing that makes it a little less appealing, I would say, based on just the reality of the money Ottawa has. But yeah, Tarasenko for me, love him. I've always loved Tarasenko, and I know people. He's your typical sniping Russian where people think like he lacks effort and he's just this goal scorer. But I mean, he's played like almost 100 playoff games. I think he has 44 playoff goals in like 94 playoff games or something. He's got a lot of experience. He's got size. And by the way, this guy scored 34 goals and 82 points in 75 games on a bad Blues team last year. Like, that's nuts at 30 years old. Contract wise, he'd probably get like 3 years at I'd say $5 million. That's kind of the general projection for him, which might be a little much for some people, but this is a guy who's going to score probably at least like 50 points playing on the wing of Tim Stützle or Josh Norris, right? So I think he would be a great cheap alternative to DeBrincat. I think he would produce close to the same as DeBrincat, maybe not quite as much, but you could then fill out, like, there are still depth options on the market. I have some pulled up. I know Denis Gurianov was one he's going to find a home. Max Comtois still out there. Aston Reese, Stanton Heinen, Pius Suter, Jesse Puljujarvi. These aren't like elite guys, but they're guys you could probably sign for like 1 million, 1.5 million and give them kind of a shot in the bottom six. So if you get a Tarasenko, you get one or two of those guys. The roster looks a lot nicer than it does right now in my mind. So yeah, Tarasenko, what are your thoughts on him? Did you get excited? Because I got friggin' excited. It was like 10 p.m. on Canada Day. I was watching the fireworks right when it happened. I was like, okay, I've got to post this, right? So
Yeah, well, I told you that, and then it was because this rate limit exceeded thing, and it was just a brutal time for that to all be going down, and it's still happening to me now. It just happened again today. But
really,
yeah, I think
oh my
it's
goodness.
I guess it's like a certain amount within a 24-hour period. Let's
I haven't
say.
had it since Saturday though, and I've looked at a lot of tweets.
Man, I mean, maybe I'm just on my phone too much, I think. But anyway, yeah. So my friend had to show me. We were all just celebrating Canada Day, and he showed me Friedman's tweet, and I'm like, Jesus, like this something I should be all over. But anyway, it was exciting. Yeah, it's one of those names. I know it's not a big fish on the market kind of signing, but it's like a Claude Giroux a little bit, right? Because he's a bit older. He's had some success in the past. Let's not forget too, folks, a Stanley Cup ring for Vladimir Tarasenko a few years back. Which doesn't, you mentioned 100 playoff games. He's also got winning experience in the playoffs, which I value more, I think, than a certain amount of games in general, right? Thing is, I think he'd fit perfectly. He's a goal scorer, right? If you're looking to replace DeBrincat's goal scoring on the free agent market, I don't know if there's a better option or was a better option anyway in this summer's market than Vladimir Tarasenko. Just quickly though with DeBrincat, because yeah, I've been like I just at this point I'm just saying just keep him, figure out a way to do it because I think the team is still better off keeping him because you basically I don't know you just strengthen your goaltending, which I think I want to say unanimously, but was one of the biggest issues last season was just 5-on-5 save percentage. And then you kind of bring back the same core of players and just hope that it gets figured out 5-on-5 shooting percentage wise because it should, right? Dorian even said in his thing, I don't know if it was I watched his first I watched the press conference after signing Corpusalo, like the free agent one, and then on YouTube it showed up for me the draft one, the one of the draft. So I just wanted to see like if the tone had shifted at all with DeBrincat and stuff, and it didn't really, I don't think, from what I saw. But in one of those pressers, Dorian mentioned DeBrincat's probably like we know he's going to score 40 next year. I liked that quote from him. Like maybe he's listened to the Everyday Sense podcast. You never know. But he is because we've both been beating that drum as well. Like DeBrincat is going to score 40 next year wherever he is. That's almost a guarantee if he's healthy all year. So knowing that, if you can't get something done with Tarasenko, literally the goal scoring options are so thin, even in a trade. And I have been of the mind, like, yeah, if you can get two solid middle nine or top nine pieces back for DeBrincat, ideal world, then let's do it. That makes sense. But would you be comfortable? So like Bertuzzi and Domi both on 1-year deals. Would you be more comfortable? It's a great question. Would you be more comfortable if the cap hits all equaled the same, right? I think it's about 8.5 for Bertuzzi and Domi together, which is not nothing. Also, the Leafs have no cap space, so something's got to happen there. We'll follow that because maybe Matt Murray's bought out, a little bit more flexibility for Ottawa.
Nylander, baby. Nylander to Ottawa.
Nylander's a Senator. I've been manifesting it. Was putting that out there on the web last night. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that after. But for DeBrincat, so Bertuzzi and Domi is 5.5 or 8.5 million for 1 year. Both of them on 1-year deals next season. Would you be more comfortable having DeBrincat on 8.5 for 1 year, or those two on an 8.5 for 1 year?
Well, the 1 year thing is weird for those two. Like they're likely to leave Toronto after 1 year is kind of how it is. I'd be fine with keeping DeBrincat. My problem with DeBrincat is that it's almost awkward now. Like I feel awkward because you almost like everybody in the room, and I'm not saying he's going to be a distraction. I think he's the type of guy who would still perform, he'd compete, even if you know he's going to leave. But just the fact that everyone knows he's going to leave and that he wants to test the market, it just feels like I hate that feeling. And it's not even, maybe it's just like a mental thing for me, but I hate the idea that we know with this core entering its contention window and everybody on the team bought in, except for this one player basically who wants to leave or wants to test the market. And we kind of all know that he's not going to be here after this year. That I don't like that feeling. Whereas with the other guys, maybe they come back. I don't know what I'd prefer. I think either way, I'd be kind of content. Bertuzzi, I really liked as an option just because of that gritty game. My question, I guess, would be like, do you need a goal scorer necessarily to replace him when you have Josh Norris coming back? Because if Norris comes back and he produces probably more or the same as DeBrincat did this past year, and again, like Ottawa's 5v5 thing, like that's gotta go up because I think they ranked 26th in 5v5 goals per 60, but they were like 14th in expected goals. So that's just a ridiculous margin of difference that won't happen again. It can't. No, there's no way that can happen again. Like DeBrincat, my trouble. I'm gonna pull this up now actually, just because I wanna use our theory here. So I've got the cap friendly again pulled up here with DeBrincat signed at $7.65 million, which is the lowest he can go after arbitration. Like, and again, he might not even get that. The arbitrator could award him like $8 million plus. It's not just necessarily a 7.65, but even at his lowest, which is 7.65, you've got Kachuk, Stützle, Giroux, and then you've got DeBrincat, Norris, Batherson as your top six. Looks good, right? Then you've got Greg, Pinto, and Joseph on the third line. Cruikshank, Kastelik, Schmeichel on the fourth line, or any interchangeable prospect could go there. Sokolov could pull in. That forward group, to me, the bottom six is very shallow. I think if like you are largely banking on staying healthy, if Josh Norris gets hurt, you are essentially screwed, not to mince words. Like there's not much you're going to do if somebody gets hurt. The issue with this, and then you've got your defense we've talked about with Bernard Docker on the bottom pairing, and then Korpisalo and Forsberg, and you've got your scratches. The issue with this is that lineup comes out to $87 million, which is like $3.5 million over the cap. If I did the math this morning, if they signed DeBrincat for 7.65, which is the lowest you can go for 1 year, they have to trade somebody. They cannot, there's no way you can work around it. I put like, this is with 5 players making under $1 million in this lineup, and they're still $3.5 million over. So if you sign DeBrincat, you have to trade money. The only real options are Joseph, Zub, and Forsberg. They're not going to trade Forsberg because of that Korpisalo friendship. Zub, if you trade him, you're back to that questionable defense where you have an unsolidified top 4. So Joseph is out. But even trading Joseph in this lineup, you're still over the friggin' cap. And you have to replace Joseph then, and now your third line looks a lot worse. Like, do you see what I'm saying? It's just the depth is such a problem, and I know you can spread this out and make it look better, but if you trade Joseph, which you essentially have to if you sign DeBrincat, you've got to find somebody else to replace him, and then you've still got this issue. So it's so complicated, and it's hard for Dorion because, as he said, they're not going to trade DeBrincat for pennies on the dollar. Like, you can't just trade a player of DeBrincat's caliber for a second-round pick and call it a day just because you have to. You have to try and have some sort of leverage, which is also why I think they haven't signed a Tarasenko, is because if you sign a Tarasenko, that is telling everybody you're trading DeBrincat, which then means that they can basically lowball you because you have to trade him or you're going to be over the cap, right? So it's a hard situation. My hope, an ideal world for me, and I'd love to hear your ideal world based on this. My ideal world right now is that they do trade DeBrincat and they get decent assets back, whether it's like as we've said, like a Tomasino and a pick or something like a young player who has a high ceiling. And then they sign Tarasenko and they sign like a Tatar or one of those depth guys as well. And then your lineup looks a lot nicer and you have some cap flexibility. Like, that's my ideal world. I just think if you sign DeBrincat, it's going to be really hard to manage the cap and you're going to be very shallow. One injury screws the entire lineup.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. And it's tough because I think now with the situation they see themselves in and DeBrincat sees himself in, like in the short term, Ottawa has the leverage, which is crazy, right? I know that DeBrincat's got the long-term leverage. It's why they have to think about moving him this summer. But at the end of the day, the more this market kind of dries up and the more people allocate cap space to other players, they're not going to have room to sign DeBrincat for next season. So he might, like, they might not even have to go to arbitration, and they might just go, okay, we'll give you 1 year at $7 million flat, and that's all we can fit based on whatever Pinto gets or whatever. Like that's a factor as well. Now, I think you're right. I think this is a not a good bottom six, but at the same time, it could be good. It could be good when healthy. But you're right. I think it needs something else. But again, though, this is the bottom six looks like this if the top six is top heavy, right? You can still spread things out. I don't think this would be the end of the world, and I know it's obviously over the cap, and it won't work. But I don't know. I mean, the thing that's tough for me and why I'm a little frustrated with the way that the Sens are handling this DeBrincat thing is the narrative, and I'm putting narrative in, quotations here. The narrative has been that, oh, DeBrincat isn't open to signing an extension. At the moment, sure, but he's not open to it because he wants to test the market next summer. Doesn't mean he's not going to stay here. Look at how many players this year said they were going to test the market and then ended up in their home anyway. Both goalies in Carolina did that. I think there were a few players who did it as well. Like, testing the market means I want to see what I could get out there and AKA get myself the best offer. I remember a few years ago, the Colorado Avalanche, the year before they won the cup, Gabriel Landeskog didn't have a contract, and he went into that summer as a UFA, almost signed somewhere. They actually had to leave him unprotected, and then he comes back to Colorado. They win the Stanley Cup. Like, it's not uncommon, especially in the NHL, for guys to stay where their team is. And by all indications, this isn't a situation where he hates Ottawa and doesn't like the team. Like, all that's been squashed, even though that was the narrative coming out early when it was only one side talking. So this is why I'm just frustrated with the Sens. Again, we talked about this draft being the deadline. I think this put a unnecessary amount of pressure on DeBrincat's camp for the answer to be that early, because maybe they did. And I don't know why last episode or before we went live on Saturday, like, I talked about how the Sens are in the right to wait, because we had that discussion where I was saying it makes sense to wait because if you go to the market without DeBrincat and then you don't get anything, then you're screwed. I think still holding on to them while the cap might not work yet, like, you have to make a subsequent move. I wonder if I'm pretty sure they could do this. They've got, I think, Dion Phaneuf, Bobby Ryan, all the bio money on still. Like, I wonder if they can attach a first to some team and send those contracts to someone else. Like, I don't really know. That might be the way to do it. It would be an unfortunate, waste of assets essentially. But if it can lock up your cap situation without trading anyone, then I'm more comfortable with it. Now, another thing too, though, is that like, I don't know, man. I that bottom six again. You're right. It scares me, but we got to assume that they're not going to just run that top six exactly as is. And maybe they do, and they could honestly survive from it. They just, last year, their problem was that second line was not good. So they were a one-line team at 5-on-5. If they can be a two-line team at 5-on-5, I think that can mask some of the issues in the bottom six, as long as the bottom six is adequate defensively, which for the most part they were this year, especially actually that third line. Like, Joseph had great results on the defensive side of the puck, and actually every forward who joined him on that line did too. Like, it was a common denominator. We just needed more goals from Joseph because there was a lack of 5-on-5 goals from that second line too. So that's why I'm still on the keep DeBrincat train. I know it doesn't work cap wise. Another thing though that a lot of teams were doing last year, I'm sure we're going to see it a ton this year as well. You don't run every game with a 23-man roster because you just can't afford it, right? Road trips, you'd hope you can, but there's probably going to be games this year based on the Sens cap situation where they can only run 11 forward 6D. Like, it will probably happen, if we're being honest, and that's okay too. That just proves that they're still playing and they're still a top team. So I don't know. I'm still in the camp of keeping DeBrincat. I know it sounds like absolutely crazy, and I know it doesn't really work money wise, and I've had a lot of people yelling at me on Twitter about it too. But unless you get Tarasenko, another depth piece, that's all I want essentially. Like, you're a better team tomorrow if you have DeBrincat on your roster versus trading him for pennies on the dollar, which I know they don't want to do.
Well, yeah, the Tarasenko thing is kind of interesting to me and important because if Tarasenko signs with somebody today, for example, I like Thomas Tatar too, but you're basically out of options on the free agency side of things if you trade DeBrincat. So if he signs, then you're pretty much, like, if you trade DeBrincat, you have to find someone else via trade because, like, what else can you do? You cannot walk into the season without DeBrincat and then not having a replacement for him. It's just not ideal. You'd have to trade for, like, a Konechny or somebody who you're going to have to give a lot of assets for. So I liked your point there about DeBrincat, though, too. And I know there's been a lot it's hard to even know what is true and what is being spun right now in the media, because we've been led to believe by reporters that certain reporters that um that DeBrincat is disgruntled and like not like he wants out. Like that's been the narrative, is that he wants to leave Ottawa specifically, but slowly it seemed to shift into he doesn't want to leave Ottawa specifically. He just wants to test the market and see what he can get next year. Like that's kind of his agent pushing that. Um which is fair again. But you made a good point that I don't think most people have really considered, just because of how the narrative's been spun, is that DeBrincat could sign for the 7.65. Again, you have to like the unfortunate thing about kind of the bottom six you're saying about Joseph is like maybe you can fit it if you like run the smaller roster, but you pretty much would have to trade Joseph. Like it just being 3.5 million over automatically is so tough, and then you'd have to replace him. But either way, if you sign DeBrincat for the 1 year, regardless of what the rest of the lineup looks like, potentially, yeah, next summer he comes back and like he goes to the market and there's not a huge offer for him, depending on how his year goes, and he signs in Ottawa for 8 years at 8.5 million. Like, and the thing is that, and why I said originally I'd like to give DeBrincat the money is because in the long term it works. The cap is going to rise by 10 million in 3 years. Like even next year it's supposed to jump. So if you sign him for that $8.5 million deal next year, it's not a huge deal. Right now we're just in this like 1 year of the cap barely rising and we're strapped, right? Like it's just you need to see something this year. So it's hard to run this mediocre roster potentially, or less than ideal. Next summer, if he comes back and he agrees to come back to Ottawa, well, the cap's rising. You'll be fine. You can fit everyone, including Sanderson and Chychrun. I've done all the math. There's an article on it. So, like, I like that point, and I think people should consider that he might not just be wanting to leave Ottawa. He might just be wanting to see what he can get, which most players do, and that's fair.
That's how I'm reading into it too, and we're probably going to see the same. And I hate comparing the Sens to the Leafs a lot, but I think it's fascinating right now because they are in such a fascinating cap situation, contracts, like especially with all these 1 year deals they're signing. Like they're basically saying, let's go win it all, and if you don't resign, we're going to tear it all down and rebuild. Like pretty much, they got Klingberg, Bertuzzi, now Domi, all on 1 year deals. And then they got Matthews, Nylander set to expire next year as well. Like they've got, and then they still have to sign Samsonov. So the reason I'm bringing up the Leafs though is because that mentality is something that Ottawa needs to have. And until we're ready to accept, hey, it's not the end of the world if a guy walks for nothing, if he gives you 2 solid seasons and makes you a better team on the ice, it's not the end of the world if he walks or if he wants to test the market, because you've now built this team, you've built this culture to be an enticing market. You've just signed 2 big fish in back-to-back seasons that wanted to come play here. So I think having this like, I don't know, perception that they need to trade him if he's for sure going to walk. I think that's a bit of a small market mentality. And yeah, you need to recover assets as much as you can. But right now, they all their eggs are in this basket. They're not trying to supplement the team in 7 years. They're trying to make this team better in 2 years, which is why you got Chychrun, why you got Giroux on the shorter term deals on good prices. Like you can't you can look at the competitive window as Stützle and Kachuk's contracts. But you can also look at it as Giroux and Chychrun. Like this team could look very different than they do right now in 2 seasons. So you need to, Thomas Chabot is just entering his prime now. You can't worry about losing a guy for nothing. And I made this point last year. If the Sens traded for DeBrincat tomorrow and he was on some other team, and then the Sens signed him to a 1 year deal for next season, we'd have a different reaction. It's just different because we had him under team control for 2 years, and now it's under team control for 1 year. So I still don't like this I guess narrative too being pushed from a certain point of view, that the Sens need to move him if he doesn't want to stay. Like I understand the mindset. It's just with the way this team is going, they haven't made the playoffs in 6 seasons, and he's going to, as of right now, still he is the best option to make you a better team tomorrow. So I don't like because we're mentioning Tarasenko, plus you need to add Tatar. If it's just Tarasenko and like a couple picks for DeBrincat, I'm not happy, because then you're a worse forward group than you were yesterday. We've talked about this a lot. So and the thing is, I'll give the Sens credit. Dorion recognizes that. I think 3 times in his press conference on Saturday after signing Korpisalo, he mentioned they're comfortable bringing him back on a 1 year deal. He mentioned it 3 times, including when they were talking about Hamonic. He said like, we need to figure out DeBrincat because we don't know what the dollars are going to be if he's back on a 1 year. So I like that they're open to it because they recognize, hey, and also Dorion a little bit threw their camp under the bus, being like, yeah, and also another problem I have with the Sens, just this regime or whatever. This is complete negotiating through the media. All that nonsense that Dorian was saying, where we don't negotiate through the media. Yeah, you do now, buddy, because this is so blatant. It's not even funny. But when he said, they're figuring out they aren't getting the same term from other teams that were on his list as us. Um, you know, I think the Sens are also realizing, yeah, the market isn't quite as good as we thought. That's a little, there's two sides to that statement that Dorian said, right? Yeah, he's not getting the same term and contract offer that he's getting from us with other teams, so he's realizing I shouldn't have, maybe I should sign on Ottawa. And Dorian's also realizing, hey, they're not offering the same package I thought they would be offering, so maybe we got to consider keeping him. It's a two-way street, and I think it's pretty apparent that that's the case. It's not Sens aren't sitting pretty here, and neither is DeBrincat. It's a pretty terrible situation for both.
Well, the ironic thing though about this and as Sens fans, this is really hard to accept. But the thing is the whole teams aren't offering term for DeBrincat. I don't think he cares is the problem, him and his agent, because although it sucks for Ottawa not being able to recoup, as many assets or potentially work a trade out, for DeBrincat, he's 25. He's coming off of a down year, and the cap is going to rise next summer. So for him, forget about Ottawa. For him and for his agent, Jeff Jackson, who, it's been reported he's making this hard on the Sens. The thing is, he has no responsibility to make it easy on the Sens. DeBrincat didn't even ask to be traded to Ottawa. He wanted to stay in Chicago. Like, you could see it from his very first press conference, and I'm not saying he doesn't like Ottawa. I'm just saying he was a guy, and I think he said it himself, he never expected to be traded. Like, he wanted to stay. He loved Chicago. He loved his teammates. He loved the city. Like, he's a guy who never asked to be traded here. So he has no responsibility morally to help the Sens. Neither does his agent. His agent has a job to get him the most money. And guess what? Like I just said, the cap rising, a down year. Like, Dorian even said it himself, he's almost certainly going to score 40 goals next year. So if you're DeBrincat, would you really accept a contract right now, or prefer a contract right now, than waiting a year when you're probably going to have a better year and the cap is going to jump and you're going to get a massive offer? Like, for the player, it just makes sense. So I don't even think he cares that he's not getting an offer for term from these teams. By the way, they went into a span of 2 days from saying that he can't negotiate with any other teams to now he can negotiate with other teams. Like, that's another kind of blunder by Dorian on that one, where he basically said, like, he straight up told us, until we get an offer we like, he will not be able to talk to other teams. 2 days later in his press conference, he's like, yeah, he's talking to other teams. Like, we're screwed here. We just lost our leverage. So
yeah, at the draft, remember I said I watched both. Like, but I watched the draft one after.
Yep.
The draft one, he said, no, we haven't given him permission. 2-3 days later, yeah, he's got permission. So yeah.
So you would infer that means a trade is closed based on what he said, but I don't think it is. I think he's just panicking a little bit on the inside. Yeah. Like, he's low key. It seems like Dorian was really relying when he acquired him. And this is another thing, is I just think somebody has to take the blame. So I don't know how much Dorian could talk to DeBrincat. I don't know if he could at all before they acquired him. I think he could, or talk to Jeff Jackson about like an interest in the extension. Usually when a player is acquired of that caliber, they do come with an extension. I mean, like, Timo Meier didn't either, but he extended. Like, to not have an extension in place and then give up what they gave up in a top 10 pick, plus, it's risky. That was bold, and it was a home run at the time because we thought either he could be extended or traded. And the thing is, Dorian, though, now is relying on the trade, and the market's not there. So for Dorian on the Sens, this is kind of tough, because I do know that 2 good seasons would be fine, and I actually wanted to point out, too, that although it sucks, like, it's not great asset management to lose a guy that you traded 7th overall for, and Kevin Korchinski is who they picked, to lose him 2 years later for nothing. But, like, for what it's worth next year, and the cap is expected to jump, next year has a very nice free agent class. Those guys who signed for 1-year deals will be available again, and then they've got, like, there's some big names. You got the Sam Reinhart, like, Nylander's expected to be a free agent. Like, there's some big names on there if you go through the list. Like, you'll have Zucker again, Teravainen, Eberle. Like, these are guys who could then step in with all of the, because Ottawa will have a ton of space if DeBrincat doesn't come back next summer, to sign a big ticket free agent. So I just think that for Dorian, he seems to be panicking a bit, and you can tell when someone's panicking because their story starts to change, and what they're saying starts to change very quickly. And the fact that he was so adamant about, like, really hammering home that he can't negotiate, and now all of a sudden, days later, he can, and it still doesn't seem like a trade is close. I mean, that tells you all you need to know. Like, the Sens are in a rough spot here, and like I said, I just don't think DeBrincat and his camp really care about an extension right now, and that's probably why, too, he only offered so many teams. He gave them a list of so many teams that he'd be willing to go to, because guess what? Like, if they're not interested, as some of them reportedly weren't, it doesn't matter because someone's going to pay him big next summer anyways. That's his best chance at a big contract. So DeBrincat isn't sitting too bad right now on his own terms. Ottawa is kind of suffering from their bold decision to acquire him in the first place right now.
Yeah, and when a player says I want to test the market in free agency, that's not saying I don't want to be here. That's saying pay up what I think I'm going to get next summer. And look, we talked about this too. If he's saying give me 9 right now on a long-term deal, I for sure I understand why the Sens are wary. He didn't prove that he's a $9 million player, but Dorion also just said yesterday in the last few days he's going to be a 40 goal scorer again next year. He in writing he said it. So
and the cap is going to jump, so they're going to be worth more anyways, right?
exactly. So and we've long said, and I know the Sens know this. Next season is the tight season. That's the problem. That's where it gets tight. But you can survive beyond that. They can figure things out beyond that. Buyout money comes off, and it's just frustrating that this narrative is starting to be spun that they're DeBrincat's camp is backpedaling. No, they're not. They have absolutely no obligation to give you a list of teams or whatever. And like, if the Sens are at the point where an extension with DeBrincat is actually going to sweeten the trade offer, aka get you more roster players with better term, like I have my doubts about that because like all these free agents signing 1-2 year deals this summer because it wasn't a great class, but they also all recognize the cap is significantly going up. I will get way more money next summer regardless of the season I have than I did this summer. So stuff like that to me is why 1 year deal. And I love that you mentioned that the free agent class is good next year, like we've all been saying, but you said it in the context of the Sens can go replace DeBrincat adequately next summer without sacrificing too much money. Like you can probably get Bertuzzi next summer, let's say, for the same contract plus. Like you can get other guys too. Like I like that a lot. That you mentioned that because so if DeBrincat walks, it's not the end of the world next season. So if anyone has any reservations about a 1 year deal other than cap issues now, I hope that kind of cleared things up in that regard. Like it is so far from the end of the world that they bring him back on a 1 year deal. If anything, it's a bonus because you'll have a motivated player who is going to want to score 40 so he can get a massive paycheck next summer, wherever it is.
Well, the other thing about DeBrincat too and the 1 year deal and why it should be considered, we've kind of talked about both why it shouldn't. The shouldn't is more that it's going to be kind of rough next year on the lineup, like because of the cap not rising. You're going to have no depth, really, if you sign him, and you're probably going to have to trade Joseph. But another reason for the should is that players of DeBrincat's caliber don't just come around, like, all the time. Even next year's free agent class, you're not going to acquire a 40-goal scorer. It's just not going to happen. You're going to find someone who can maybe replace him on the second line, but it's the same right now. Like, Tarasenko is, although I love him and he would provide you with points, he's a downgrade from DeBrincat still. Like, that doesn't make your lineup better. It just kind of supplements what DeBrincat was doing and a little bit less. So keeping DeBrincat for the year and then potentially even re-signing him, like that's important because you're not probably going to find another player of that level again. So, and of course, like they already have a few in Stützle and stuff, but you can't, like, this is something to consider about keeping him is that, and I just want to go back to that point about how they might even extend him. Like, it sucks that this narrative is being spun. That's what I have to say because DeBrincat, like a lot of fans are hating on him right now. Like there's a lot of negativity towards him right now on Twitter. Which I'm sure, I don't know if he cares or is reading it, but I'm sure during the season, if he ends up staying all season, there's going to be people, and this is why I'm almost just like mentally just wanting it to happen, a trade now, is because I just feel like all season, the whole thing is going to be shrouded in negativity, and like people are going to be very, I don't know if I want to say like they're going to boo DeBrincat or anything. I don't think that would be the case, but I think there's going to be these constant tweets about, well, he just wants out, or if he has any sort of a slump, there's going to be people calling him out for not trying because he doesn't want to be here. That's just how they've spun it. And frankly, if it is coming from the Sens, and we don't know, like it could just be the reporting, but if it is coming from the Sens and they're kind of spinning this like from the organizational standpoint to make DeBrincat look like the bad guy, which is how it seems so far, that's pretty disappointing, to be honest with you, because I don't think that's fair. I think it just has to be noted that Dorion acquired him knowing that he had 2 years of control and knowing that there was no extension on the table. When you do that, you're taking a risk, and the risk right now is not paying off because he's in a tough spot and it's kind of strapped the roster, and now they're spinning it. So if you acquired him and now you're spinning it like he's the bad guy for not extending, I mean, again, He has no obligation to. And frankly, his agent is doing his better job by trying to take him to the market and get a big payday. So, do you have anything else on DeBrincat? Like, we've pounded this into the ground. I think that, just to sum it up one more time, signing him for 1 year makes the roster shallow this year. It also provides you with the chance to extend him. Like, I think, again, that's not off the table. There's nothing saying anymore. Another thing that's changed, by the way, that he doesn't want to stay in Ottawa. Like, that's kind of not been reported in a while. It's now that he just wants to test the market. So that narrative changing also tells you that there's maybe a few things behind the scenes that aren't totally truthful or clear here. They're kind of spinning it. And then signing him or trading him would provide you, if you can get a replacement like Tarasenko and sign a depth piece or two, the roster would probably be, I think it would be good. I think that would potentially even be an upgrade, but it banks on replacing DeBrincat, which is a lot easier said than done. And it also banks on getting assets back in a trade that can help you now. Like, it's just trading him for futures doesn't do much for you right now. So there are routes for Dorion, but it is all on him. And frankly, right now I'm leaning towards firing him more than I am keeping him past this year. So it's a lot on the line for Pierre.
Yeah, it'll be the career defining move. Like I think Korpisalo was a good move, but again, that also could blow up in his face. But he had to do something, so it was a good move at the time. Like they got the best UFA goalie because all the other top ones and Yari and Anderson stayed in their wherever they were before, right? And so I don't mind any of those picks or takes. Sorry, I should say, because like it's really frustrating. Like you said, it's disappointing, the narrative that's being spun, and I don't want to say we're assuming, but the Bruce is reporting what he's hearing from the Sens, and it's disappointing that that's you know what's coming out. The fact that Bruce is using words like disgruntled, and yeah, I'd be disgruntled too if I was DeBrincat. He just got absolutely deadlined for no reason. Nothing happened. He's cooperating. It sounds like, and then it's coming out like, oh yeah, his agent really messed this up. That's what Bruce said, and maybe that's just Bruce talking. Maybe that one's actually coming from the Sens too. I don't know. I'd hope not.
I mean, they probably do see it as the agent is screwing them over, but again, that's his job. Like, he's just doing what's best for DeBrincat as a player in his career. So you can't really say he's screwing you over. It was your decision to trade for him.
Yeah, and I think we went through this whole thing with Tkachuk too when he was holding out. I know I kind of compared the situations. It's much different, but there are comparisons in the sense that it's a bit of, I don't want to say it's a holdout, but they aren't meeting on contract stuff, and we're getting information from different sides, kind of, but mainly right now it's just the Sens. And I feel like that whole Tkachuk thing, we only heard from Tkachuk's camp ever, if anything. So, but again, towards the end, when the season was starting, there were people starting to turn on Tkachuk, just being like, this isn't fair to the team, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I get all that. So now it just feels like it's way more amplified on this one player. And look, if you're DeBrincat, though, it makes sense that if you're a little disgruntled, let's say, that just because of my age and the way the timelines worked, and I got traded here against my will, and now I'm here next summer, and you got to pinch pennies on me because you have no cap room. That's not my fault. As a player, that's not his fault at all. I went out, and I don't know when it was, a couple weeks ago, I tweeted all of the contracts that Pierre Dorion signed after trading for DeBrincat, after acquiring him, knowing full well he needed an extension next summer, needed a new contract next summer. He signed Josh Norris to that monster deal. He signed Claude Giroux to his. He traded for Chychrun, signed Zub, signed Joseph. Like, those are 5 big deals that aren't nothing. With more than all of them, Joseph's just under 3, but everyone is over 3 million. Tim Stützle as well. Like, and it's not that any of them are bad deals. Like, I'd say honestly, all of them, maybe save for Joseph based on what he did last year, like, all of them are good contracts. That's true, but there's only so much room to have that many good contracts, right? And that's the league. And I think it's fair to say, I know Dorion's mentioned it a lot. He got everyone, he's got his top guys at good cap hits. He got all that. Josh Norris could have screamed bridge deal, right? I think a long-term extension, kind of, you get giddy and you're like, yeah, he wants to sign long-term. Let's do it, because this he's going to pop off. And even if he didn't get injured this year, if he goes for 25 goals and 60 points, it's like, I don't know if I want to pay $8 million for that now, right? I think I know I mentioned yesterday that as a Sens fan, it's the first time worrying about every dollar mattering. and doing this cap friendly stuff. It's fun. It's Pierre Dorian's first time doing it too as a GM. Let's not forget that. He's been on these teams. The best team he had was what, 10 million under the cap in 2017. Like they were a like just cheap roster. And then it was tear it down, get his cheap, hit the salary floor, or hit the cap floor, but low salaries. Like that was his job. And now it's let's be a cap team. That's kind of their motto. And yeah, they're doing that, but they've officially run into a cap problem. And I don't know if I trust him to get them out of it, is basically what I'm saying.
What you're kind of saying too is that they didn't account for DeBrincat. Like they basically signed everybody to these big deals, and I think Joseph is still the one that stands out to me. Just because I think they signed him after he played 11 games for them after being like a career fourth liner in Tampa. They signed him to a $3 million deal for 4 years after an 11 game tryout. So that was a bit bold. I do think like they've done fine with their contracts. Norris again was risky mainly because of his injury history. Like you were getting into this guy who could be hurt for half of those years, frankly. And I still say like every mock lineup we've seen and done so far is so reliant on Josh Norris staying healthy. If that guy gets hurt after 5 games again, I don't even know what to say. Like, you've got to start looking for other options at that. But, like, I'm sorry, but, like, you need someone who can be there and playing the games. Same with Chikrin. Like, the health is such a major point that people kind of overlook when we're talking about the lineup. Nothing you can do but hope, though. So, but, yeah, like, Dorian, I don't know if I trust him either managing the cap moving forward. It is nice to be able to worry about cap dollars. Like, that's a good thing. It's good that we're spending. It's also frustrating because it's such a fine line you have to walk of doing a good job and doing a bad job. Like, you can very quickly screw things up here and people will point to Toronto and their depth by being a little too bold with the cap. But regarding DeBrincat, like, it does seem like they just didn't really account for it. And again, like, next summer, I'd be willing to pay him big bucks. Like, if he's coming off, and the funny thing is, we talked about this, if he's coming off, like, this past year, if he would have scored 3 more goals out of the 15 posts he hit and would have hit 70 points, the outlook would be so different. And that's wild. It is really crazy how that is true. Is if he would have, because he scored 27 goals, 66 points. If he scored 30 goals, 70 points, people would probably be, I bet you, like, there would be a large portion of the current people saying, no, don't give him any money. That would be saying, yeah, sign him. It's just the outlook of the number, right? So if he scores 35 goals next year and 75 points, and he's looking awesome with Josh Norris, and they're looking really good, people are going to be like, yeah, hand him $9 million. Like, let's sign him long term. I don't know. It's just funny how the outlook works. Either way, like I said, huge risk by Dorian. And I consider these really this summer, I guess, and next season, but precisely this summer, like, this is Dorian's tryout to me for his job, because he's basically trying out for Michael Andlauer. It was reported Andlauer wanted to bring in Steve Stais. The timeline's kind of screwed it up, and that could be a future option, right? So I think Dorian and Smith this year, it's basically their tryout, but Dorian right now, so far for me, is receiving a low grade because we just, like, the roster right now still has, I've got a little list here, like, right now you've got filled in Kachuk, Stützle, Giroux, and then you don't know who your second line left wing is because DeBrincat's unsigned, and then you've got Norris and Batherson, and then you've got 2 holes in the third line with Pinto in the middle, and then your fourth line is, right now, Joseph, Kastlik, and a question mark, right? And then Bernard Docker is expected to be on the bottom pairing, but that's kind of a question mark too. You don't know for sure. So they still need to do some stuff here, and Pierre Dorian, like, pick up the phone, like, let's get going, because time's running out, and like we said, if Tarasenko gets signed somewhere else, you're very thin for options to replace DeBrincat. In that case, you're basically having to go with the 1 year and hope that things work out as you want them to.
Yeah, and I think, look, I was kind of hoping that something else would happen. I know you were too. That they've done nothing. They kind of let the market sweep them by, which is okay. And yeah, they got their goalie, which is good. Feels like a whole separate issue though, right? Because they could have gotten the goalie and not gotten the goalie, and this DeBrincat thing would still be a problem.
Did you not think they were going to sign, like, a couple depth players though? Like, they
Yeah,
haven't even
of course
signed one depth forward that could play in the NHL. Like, not one.
Yeah,
It's weird.
And look, it's so easy to be like, oh, why didn't you sign this guy? Maybe they legitimately tried, and it's good that we've got this Tarasenko report, so they are talking to people. But
Yeah.
like, it takes two to tango, right? And maybe they just, like, you got to consider that as well. But yeah, it's been disappointing, and again, it's the GM's job to sign players, and whether they want to come here or not, you got to figure out a way to do that. So I think we can wrap up there, honestly, because there isn't a ton else to talk about. So we'll wrap up there. This has been episode 21 of the Everyday Sens podcast. We'll see everyone on Friday. Please like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube. And we will see everyone on Friday.